Okay. All right, everybody, thanks for coming out this evening, as Talia said, and I'll just give you a brief introduction here. Our wonderful guest speaker tonight is Christina Speaks, and she is a registered dietitian, oncology nutritionist with Providence. Her journey in nutrition began at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas, where she completed her undergraduate and master's degree with a primary focus in nutrition research and community. She spent a large part of her career in clinical nutrition, including critical care. Christina enjoys helping people feel confident and knowledgeable about the foods they eat. She currently works as an oncology outpatient dietitian at the Providence Cancer Institute and sees patients in Portland, Oregon. And when she's not working, she enjoys distance running, hiking, camping, and spending time with her husband and 3 sons. Thank you so much for joining us this evening, and take it away, please.
Great. Thank you so much for that introduction. I am just going to share my screen so you all can see the presentation. I hope you were able to get copies okay. I have lots of notes in there that are for you to keep. Let me see. Okay, can everyone see this okay? I believe so. I'm going to hope. So, distinguishing fact from fiction, the 5 most common myths around cancer and food. And I also included a bit about navigating cancer fatigue. So, first up, sugar will feed my cancer. And no, sugar will not feed cancer. We know that the chronic exposure to diets high in added sugars and inadequate intake or access to nutrient-dense foods is correlated with developing cancer. In other words, chronic exposure to diets that are high in sugar may lead to higher insulin levels, which may influence cancer cell growth the most. So it's not necessarily the sugar itself, but rather the lack of things in the diet to create a more balanced blood sugar, like lacking fiber and protein. At the end of the day, all carbohydrates are broken down into simple sugars and used for energy. And that could be whether they come from a piece of candy or a potato or pasta. At the end of the day, they're all broken down into simple sugars and absorbed into the blood and used for energy, or they're stored if they're taken in excess. Carbohydrates should make up about 45 to 60% of our diets. And these include things like fresh fruits and vegetables, whole grains, dairy, beans, lentils, but also our sweet foods like cookies, cakes, candies, etc. And your body prefers to thrive off of these sugars and will, with or without carbohydrate containing foods. Glucose, otherwise known as sugar, feeds every cell in the body and is so important to the function of your brain that the body has several backup strategies to keep blood sugar levels normal. Even without carbohydrate in the diet, your body will make sugar from other sources, including protein and fat. For example, the bodily process gluconeogenesis is just when your body is able to break down proteins and fats to create sugar in the absence of adequate carbohydrate. So your body is very smart and it has a preference for where it gets its energy from, and it's going to thrive off of that with or without it. It's also important to remember that although all cells, including cancer cells, depend on blood sugar for energy, more sugar doesn't make cancer cells grow, just as withdrawing it doesn't slow the growth. So unfortunately, if we see diets, very strict diets that restrict sugar or even all carbohydrate containing foods, we're not going to necessarily take away the cancer or help decrease cancer progression. The idea that sugar itself could directly fuel the growth of cancer cells can lead some to avoid all carbohydrate containing foods. So maybe like the strictest keto Atkins diet you've ever been on. But this is super counterproductive, especially if you are experiencing cancer right now and going through treatment and having side effects that are impacting your ability to eat. If you're struggling to eat, the last thing you want to do is have any sort of restrictive diet going on. Plus, it's just stressful and anxiety inducing, and any kind of excess stress also raises your blood sugar levels. So, kind of early when we talked about excess insulin production due to high blood sugar, stress also raises our blood sugar. And so, it's at the end counterproductive to even worry about restricting or eliminating sugar in the first place. Now, with that, do I mean you should start consuming a bunch of added sugar all day, every day? Probably not. But don't feel guilty if you do have added sugars. And if you are someone right now that is in treatment or are having difficulties eating, your taste buds are diminished. Sweet foods may be the only thing that tastes good to you. And so you should find foods that taste best to you and build around those foods so you're able to maintain adequate intake. Um, okay. Next is juicing can help cure my cancer. And the short answer is no, unfortunately not. There's no evidence that juicing is any better than a balanced diet. When you juice the fruit or vegetable, you're missing out on a lot of key nutrients like fiber. Instead, you want to aim to have at least 5 servings of whole fruits and vegetables every day. So, not 5 of each, but 5 in total. And if eating is difficult, maybe juicing can serve as a way to get in a serving of fruits or vegetables during the day, or it can serve as a way to get in extra calories. So, for many that are having troubles eating, it's easier to just drink a calorie dense beverage like a juice. So, if that's your purpose for juicing, that's absolutely fine. Otherwise, juice should never serve as a meal replacement. And it's the healthier option is to just have the whole fruit and or vegetable itself. Okay. Next is I should avoid dairy. And no, you do not have to avoid dairy. Many avoid dairy due to concerns about hormones, especially if you maybe are experiencing an estrogen receptor positive breast cancer. The idea of adding in any additional hormones to your daily life or intake can be really intimidating. And I find that dairy is the first one to go. And dairy does contain trace amounts of hormones, including estrogen. However, the amount of estrogen you're exposed to from dairy products is far too little to have any effect on body functions. And just to give you an idea or an example, if you consume 3 servings of a glass of whole milk, 8 ounces whole milk, you would have consumed 0.1 to 0.1% of the number of hormones produced by the body in a given day. So at the end of the day, there's not a significant amount of hormones, and it's very unlikely that that would influence any hormones in your body. We don't have any evidence to suggest that anyway, and nor do we have evidence that dairy foods cause breast cancer or make breast cancer any worse. If anything, dairy has actually been shown to be protective against many cancers, including breast cancer, but it's more so dairy foods that tend to be low in fat, like Greek yogurt, skim milk, low fat cottage cheese. And this may be due to the fact that higher fat dairy products, like whole milk products, ice creams, they tend to be high in saturated fat or may contain traces of trans fat, which are correlated with increased risk for cancer. Oh, I forgot on this slide, constipation. So that's another trivial concern. I would say more not my breast cancer patients, but any other patients, is the concern that dairy is constipating. And dairy foods don't necessarily cause constipation. If you're letting dairy replace fiber foods, then maybe, but dairy in moderation does not equal constipation. So if if you enjoy dairy foods, you should continue consuming dairy foods. They're not required. If you're not someone that's ever had dairy or you have lactose intolerance, you don't have to start incorporating them, but don't feel like you're doing anything wrong if you do have dairy. Okay, next we have red meat causes cancer. And no-ish. We The evidence is pretty mixed. And a lot of the evidence for this are based on correlation studies. I guess on that premise, might I say, all of our nutrition research is really based on correlations. As nutrition, we can't single out or do an effective randomized control trial like we can with like medications. Because one patient may be eating something, we can have all these patients eating this, but they also are doing other things and eating other things in their daily lives. It's very hard to isolate that one food. So all we can do is draw correlations among populations. So we see that among these groups of people that eat this type of food, they tend to have higher risk for developing cancer later in life. But we may also find that all these patients like bananas and all these patients have limited access to healthcare. And so all of those things may be correlated to cancer, but again, correlation doesn't equal causation. So anyway, chronic exposure and the overconsumption of red meat is correlated with higher risk of developing cancer. So it is recommended by the American Institute for Cancer Research guidelines to have no more than 3 to 4 servings per week. And red meats are beef, pork, lamb, and also ultra processed red meats like beef jerky, deli meat, sausages, pepperoni, hot dogs, and these should be limited or avoided. A lot of those correlation studies regarding red meats really focuses in on ultra processed red meats. And so if you could do your best to avoid those, limit those as much as possible, but moderation is key. And so every once in a while, if you're enjoying some beef jerky on a road trip, that's absolutely okay. And this is because when cooked over high heat, meats form heterocyclic amines, which acronym HCAs, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs. And they're chemicals that can affect your DNA. And much of the research showing this is based on rat studies. However, human research does have some positive correlations. And so, again, with those positive correlations, we're seeing these trends pretty commonly. And so, we try to remember that we should just try to limit these foods as much as possible or reduce, again, like the red meats to 3 to 4 times per week. And again, it's important to remember for all foods, correlation does not equal causation, and moderation is key. When building a meal, that especially it contains red meat, you should focus on allowing that to be the side or the complement rather than the star of the show. So, for example, I enjoy making a white bean soup where I blend the white beans as like the base mixed with some broth and kale and onion and garlic and a bunch of seasonings. And I'll add bits of bacon into that to add some flavor. And so that, the star of the show of that soup is my plant foods like beans and kale and onion and garlic. And then I have a side or a complement to that, which being the bacon. Okay, next we have soy contains estrogen. And no, phytoestrogens are not estrogen. Soy foods contain no estrogen. And this confusion about soy arises from the term phytoestrogens. Some soy nutrients, the isoflavones, have chemical structures that look a bit like the estrogen found in a woman's body. So, whoever the researcher was that was studying soy saw this chemical structure and was like, wow, that kind of looks like estrogen. And they hypothesized that maybe it may act like estrogen. Um, but that's all that ever came to that. It was just a hypothesis, and it's never been proven. And so now we just have this myth that keeps going around, and yeah, so this is where the term phytoestrogen originated, and they're not the same thing as female estrogens. So soy foods don't contain estrogen, and you should enjoy soy foods because they've actually been found to be protective against many cancers. Of course, you want to stick to healthy sources of soy or phytoestrogen containing foods like tofu, tempeh, soy milk, edamame. And this includes men as well. Men who are experiencing breast cancer or not can enjoy soy foods. Again, these do not contain estrogen and will not feed your cancer or give you attributes usually associated with women. Eating soy doesn't decrease masculinity, impact hormones, provide estrogen. Okay, next is artificial sweeteners cause cancer. And no, artificial sweeteners do not cause cancer that we know of thus far. It's kind of like many other foods, though it's not going to provide any source of nutrition. So examples of artificial sweeteners are aspartame, sucralose, saccharin. These also may be referred to as non-nutritive sweeteners, as they don't provide any sort of nutrition, but they do provide some sweetness. Some people can't tell the difference between artificial sweeteners versus the real sugar flavors, but some people do, and it's a hard no, and it's not a part of their diet anyway. But if it does happen to be a part of your diet, that's okay. We don't have any evidence to suggest that it's going to make your cancer any worse or even being related to causing cancer. Um, Many of the tests that have been conducted to try to see if there is any kind of correlation or causation with sweeteners have been done in labs and on rats and mice. And this is where those study headlines come in the news station that aspartame causes cancer. However, in these studies, rats were given 10,000 the amount of aspartame any human would ever consume. And so, of course, they had adverse reactions. I think it's important to be able to go back and look at the study and kind of interpret that. But at the same time, it's not up to the general public to do that. I think we should just report on the evidence. But um, anyway, also important to point out that a lot of the studies that have been done on non-nutritive sweeteners, artificial sweeteners, um, that were showing correlations to cancer, they were all rodent studies. We don't have that much human data or any human data suggesting that these are cancer causing. And this is supported by the National Cancer Institute and the FDA, as they found no clear evidence that aspartame and artificial sweeteners cause cancer in humans. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not saying you should just start incorporating a Diet Coke into your diet every day, but sometimes during cancer treatment, patients may experience unintentional weight gain. Maybe they have a lot of phlegm or nausea, and a Coke is what helps them and it works. Maybe they take a proton pump inhibitor or something that needs a little bit help to digest, and so they drink a Coca-Cola with that. Whatever your reason, if you want to use swap to diet and it works for you, that's absolutely okay. There should be no guilt or concern about enjoying these things in moderation. And moderation may look like a Diet Coke per day, but again, you don't have to incorporate that every day. Of course, we should focus on limiting our desire to consume lots of sweet drinks. But again, try not to be concerned. Okay, so please don't judge me. This was my attempt at making a meme. It brought me back to a Thanksgiving with family, and I always have, you know, some aunt or uncle, or in my case, my grandma, that is always trying to tell us things that we need to do to be better humans, and all in love. So you just think of, this person that tells you that you just need to exercise, you just need to eat healthy, and it's not just that. There are so many other things that are going on in life, and especially if you're experiencing a chronic illness, you're fatigued, you can't just all of a sudden incorporate an exercise and decide to cook all your meals from scratch. So just a gentle reminder that we don't all have the 24 hours in a day, and to try to give yourself some grace. Okay, so that's kind of served as my transition slide into fatigue. From what I've been told, is a really common requested topic. And fatigue is that feeling of being tired all the time, regardless of how much sleep you get. Um, Across the board, whether someone experiencing breast cancer or metastatic breast cancer or all my other cancer patients, I would say this is the number one complaint I get from everyone. And some potential causes may be inadequate intake of calories, fluids, unbalanced meals and snacks, also weight changes, unintentional weight loss or unintentional weight gain, insulin resistance, decreased movement, and anemia. Um, and anemia is complicated. When you come in, if you're someone receiving treatment right now, you get your labs drawn all the time. And one of your labs hemoglobin is probably always low. And that is actually a really common side effect to treatment or to having the cancer itself. So as providers, we will interpret your labs, and it may be that your hemoglobin is low in addition to some other labs that may suggest an iron deficiency anemia or B12 deficiency or folate deficiency, and then that will be acted on. We'll probably have that lab drawn. And that may be a cause of some of the fatigue you're experiencing. But then, unfortunately, sometimes that's not the case, and just this low hemoglobin itself isn't necessarily related to a nutrient deficiency or a micronutrient deficiency, but rather a side effect to the treatment and the cancer itself. And unfortunately, eating or supplementing anything won't necessarily change that. And so, anyway, I trust that, myself or your provider are able to interpret that and let you know what type of anemia you're experiencing. So, if it is micronutrient related, then that can be tweaked, supplemented, adjusted to hopefully help with some of that fatigue you may be experiencing. Um, some additional non-nutrition related causes of fatigue may be inadequate pain management. So, with cancer or maybe post-surgery or pre-surgery, a lot of things may be causing pain. And if that pain is not managed adequately, that can increase your level of fatigue. It can make eating difficult. It can make day-to-day activities especially difficult. And then also medications, specifically pain relievers, may also have the side effect of fatigue, or anti-nausea medications. I'm specifically thinking of right now dexamethasone, which is a steroid often used in many treatments. It has a side effect of insomnia, which, if you're not sleeping at night, that can definitely increase fatigue. And so, if you suspect that you perhaps are experiencing a side effect that is really making day-to-day activities difficult because you've got this increased fatigue, then definitely talk about it. Talk about it to your provider, so maybe some adjustments can be made. Other things that non-nutrition related are like hormone changes. With cancer treatment, sometimes women are put under this forced menopause, if you will, and that definitely can contribute to feelings of fatigue, depression, hypothyroidism, which is common after radiation treatments, post-surgery, of course, low immune function, decreased immune, or I'm sorry, if you're immune compromised, all of these things may be related to fatigue. And so it's a lot. It's really hard to pinpoint, and it's really hard to treat sometimes. But nutritionally, you can definitely make sure to pick up some of these tips and try to see if that helps improve it any. So first, of course, we want to try to maintain adequate intake. Eating is the ultimate act of self-care. We should all be eating and nourishing our bodies. And for many cancer patients, their appetite is best in the morning. And so you really want to take advantage of that time to get in good nutrition. And if breakfast is not your thing, you just grew up skipping breakfast, or maybe you're not hungry in the morning, and you find that you're running on fumes by mid-morning, it's time to start eating a regular breakfast. Oftentimes, I see patients will skip breakfast and attempt to maybe lose weight or to save up for later, save their calories for later. And that typically ends in energy crashes, cravings, moodiness, and suboptimal food choices throughout the rest of the day. If your body is super, super hungry and you walk through the door without eating all day, you're going to eat the first thing that sounds good to you. That's the most easily attainable. Um, and then also, you should try your best to eat regular meals and snacks about every 3 to 4 hours. And so, if you're maybe someone that has 3 meals a day and a snack, that would be fine. Or maybe you're someone that eats something small every 2 to 3 hours. That's also fine. And again, yeah, many state I'm not hungry in the morning, and it's important to recognize that fueling our bodies does not have to be when our stomach is growling. Other ways our bodies are telling us we are hungry is the feeling of being anxious, moodiness, cravings, dizzy, sluggish, fatigue, or just knowing that you may not necessarily be hungry now, but you're providing your body with the fuel it needs to get through the rest of the day. For example, on Wednesdays, my son has gymnastics in the evening, which means we're going to have a really late dinner, like 8 o'clock. And I know we're going to have a late dinner. So we go ahead and have an additional snack rather than coming home famished. And I mean, at that time, I'm not necessarily hungry, but I know I need a little extra fuel. And sometimes our body just needs that gentle reminder that, you need to maintain intake. And the best thing that you can do for that is to plan out your meals and to the best of your ability, of course, and have safe, quick options available. Lately, mine has been pre-portioned homemade trail mix, and it's not like a typical trail mix. I've been adding freeze-dried fruit, almonds, a high fiber cereal called Puffins, and Jelly Bellies because we need some sweetness in our life. Anyway, back to breakfast. So if you are having trouble with incorporating a breakfast, it's some easy, healthy examples I'm thinking of are things like overnight oats. So if you prepare it ahead of time in the evening, just pop it in the fridge and it's ready to grab and go in the morning. I've even seen pre-made overnight oats sold at grocery stores now. So if that's an option for you, that's fine too. No wrong foods here. Maybe you're doing Greek yogurt with fruit, eggs with veggies and cheese if you're a savory kind of person. I like to do chia seeds and ground flaxseed and some Greek yogurt. I'll even add some oats in there if I'm extra productive. I'll leave that in the fridge to thicken overnight and it's ready to go. I'll just grab it with me and take it with me in the morning when I'm off to work. So again, we want to eat those regular meals and snacks every 3 to 4 hours. We want to avoid skipping meals. So trying your best to establish those consistent meal times. And if you're someone going through treatment and your appetite is not the greatest in the world, you may need to consider setting a reminder on your phone. Don't let yourself get to the point of being famished. You want to this combined with a feeling of being fatigued, and you are more likely to overconsume foods of low nutritional value. And so it's best to keep consistent meal times, have readily available snacks on hand that you are familiar with and that are easy to grab and that are balanced. We'll talk about that in a bit. And this helps keep overall metabolism happy, reduces stress on your system, keeps blood sugar stable. And then also hydration. So at the end of the day, we want to aim to have 8 to 10 cups of fluid per day. If you're experiencing treatment side effects, you may need more. So if you are vomiting or experiencing diarrhea, you may need more fluid or different types of fluid like electrolyte replacement. If that's not you're not experiencing treatment side effects, you're not undergoing treatment right now, 8 to 10 cups per day. And we want to try to choose water the most often and try to decrease our intake of any added sugar drinks. So, sodas, frappuccinos, fancy teas, even. And again, unless you're experiencing side effects, you're having a lot of difficulty eating, then we want to try to decrease those added sugar drinks. So I kind of mentioned a balanced meal. These are just some pictures and examples of some balanced meals. So not only do we want to maintain adequate intake with consistent meals and snacks throughout the day, but we also should be trying to make this a balanced meal or snack. And this means it should have a carbohydrate, protein, and fiber, and probably some healthy fats. So I guess this act of combining a protein and fiber at each meal helps provide healthy nutrition and overall meal satisfaction. So I'm not sure if anyone relates to this, but if you've ever had a meal that's not quite balanced, and then you find that you're hungry an hour later, even though you just had eaten, like perhaps it's lacking some sort of protein or fiber, or you're not eating enough. Some examples of fiber foods you should try to include in every meal are things like our fruits or vegetables, including root vegetables like potatoes, onions, carrots, whole grains, legumes, your beans, lentils, nuts, seeds, and then of course protein foods. So most of the time, if there's nothing impacting your ability to eat, you want to choose lean and or plant-based proteins like beans, lentils, soy, chicken, fish, eggs, unsweetened dairy foods like skim milk, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese. Um, and this combination of adding this protein and fiber with every meal helps promote blood sugar stability. So earlier we talked about how we should try to keep our meals consistent and plan to eat something about every 3 to 4 hours. Also, having this balanced meal. This combination will promote this blood sugar stability. You're less likely to experience that large blood sugar spike, which may result in a crash, or those higher instances of elevated insulin. And so, um, and the way that I guess this happens is fiber and protein help slow down your digestion, and it helps your body allow it to take its time to absorb it. And you're less likely to experience that crash or that ravenous feeling at the end of the day. And many are wondering, like, where do I start? How do I start making balanced meals? And there's so much out there about like these wrong and right foods. And you should start with the foods you already enjoy. So there are no wrong foods. No food is bad. All food's good food and all food has a place. And so enjoy your current meals and snacks. Just how can we optimize these? What can we add to this? So we never want to subtract the foods you enjoy, but rather focus on including things like making sure every meal includes a fruit and or vegetable, and of course a protein source. Earlier, I mentioned my homemade trail mix with the Jelly Bellies, and that's because I love candy. But candy alone is not necessarily satisfying. That's not going to get me by until dinner. And if it is, I'm going to need a lot of it. And so I like to create a more satisfying snack with my candy by adding a a high fiber cereal, extra fiber with the freeze dried fruit, a protein with the almonds, plus additional fiber and healthy fats that also are with almonds. And so that for me is a balanced snack. I've built extra things around the food that I enjoy. So it's more satisfying and more nourishing for my body. And on this slide, we can kind of see some examples of just some balanced meals. For the sake of this example, I'm going to pretend that in the top picture, I'm going to say that's edamame, not peas. It's hard to tell, but what we see here is looks like to be fried white rice with maybe some egg and kimchi and edamame. So the white rice serves as our carbohydrate food, as well as the kimchi, and that's also our vegetable in the mix. It's got some fiber in there. And then our protein source is the egg and the edamame. Edamame also has fiber. And so that is a great, well-balanced meal. And then down below in the other circle, it looks like a piece of whole grain toast. It's got some fiber in there. I'm a sourdough gal. That could be fine too. It's got some smooth peanut butter, some sliced bananas, and some chia seeds. I'm guessing those are chia seeds rather than poppy seeds. But the chia seeds may serve as a protein source, and they're also really great in fiber. Got some healthy fats mixed in there. The banana and the bread are your carbohydrate, which also contain fiber. Your smooth nut butter is the protein source. And so, again, these are just some examples of what a balanced meal may look like for you. Doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be ordered through HelloFresh or Factor or whatever. Next, we have just other tips. So incorporating some caffeine. General caffeine guidelines say that you should have no more than 400 milligrams per day, unless you're sensitive to it or having certain treatment side effects like diarrhea. That may change. So what this looks like is 8 ounces of coffee is about 80 to 100 milligrams of caffeine. So if you enjoy a couple cups, maybe 2 or 3 cups of coffee during the day, that's not excessive. That's within those guidelines. Just remember to be mindful of excessive added sugars that may come with specialty coffee drinks or energy drinks. And also remember that coffee or energy drinks is not a meal. We should never let coffee be the meal. It's not the star of the show, it's just a beverage. Often I see patients will maybe start their day or get through their mid-afternoon with a cup of coffee rather than food. And coffee is not going to help your fatigue status as well as it could have without the meal. So make sure that you're nourishing your body with calories and protein. And the black coffee can serve as an addition to your hydration, to your liquid throughout the day, not a meal. And also just be mindful of energy drinks. This guideline again is 400 milligrams per day. And so if you're someone that enjoys energy drinks already, just trying to choose one that's lowest in added sugars and try to be mindful of the amount of caffeine that's within these energy drinks. We don't want to, a lot of them may come with 400 milligrams or more, and you may want to avoid those. And then next, get outside, especially now that we're finally kind of trying to get some sunshine here in the Pacific Northwest. Spending time outside or opening windows may help increase energy. You can also add some green to your space. I've managed to have some pothos in my house that are still surviving that did not die. So something, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Any kind of green in your space may help with overall energy levels. Next, we have exercise. So we kind of talked a lot about insulin and our body's ability to control blood sugar spikes and things. And at the end of the day, of course, we want to avoid excess production of insulin. We want to avoid those blood sugar spikes. And exercise is a really great way of doing that. Exercise increases insulin sensitivity. And so it makes your cells more readily available to it. It makes it easier for your body to utilize that insulin so it doesn't have to keep producing more than it needs. Um, and exercise is, again, a natural, great way to increase that insulin sensitivity, promote that blood sugar stability, and avoid those crashes and fatigue. Additionally, it increases and preserves lean body mass and stamina, all of which improve or prevent fatigue at the end of the day. Now, I know this is all easier said than done, and many aren't familiar with exercise and have never necessarily had an exercise regimen. And so there's no wrong ways to exercise. You should choose something that you don't hate because that's the thing you're most likely to stick to. And if you are not too stable on your feet, maybe mobility is limited and you're not quite sure where to start, a good place to start too is with a physical therapist, which you could definitely ask for a referral. Um, and, if that's not you and you are familiar with exercising, you wanna aim for a mix of cardio and strength training activities about 3 to 4 times per week for starters. And then as you become stronger, your stamina increases, then of course this should increase too. If you're a walker or runner, maybe starting with going by time rather than miles, or distance. So if it's easy to say, today I'm going to do 15 minutes of walking, and then increase that time as you become stronger and your stamina improves. And again, if you don't enjoy it, you won't do it. So all movement counts, whatever is easiest for you, whatever you enjoy. Walking is perfectly fine too. Walking has been shown to increase insulin sensitivity, decrease risk for diabetes, decrease risk for cancer. So do your walking, do whatever exercise you enjoy. Um, Here, I just have some evidence based resources for you. Here's the National Cancer Institute. This link on here is a nice PDF about just some tips and tricks for eating if you're maybe someone going through curative cancer treatment, some things that you can do before, during, and after your cancer treatment. And then also the American Cancer Society. Lots of great resources on there. And the American Institute for Cancer Research, which also has tips for prevention. So before cancer, what you should do during, and then things to maybe prevent reoccurrence after. Or just if you're living with a metastatic disease that you are going to be dealing with for a very long time. These are all wonderful, great resources. And not included on this slide, but I wanted to bring up is just some advice about what types of information you're exposing yourself to. I know a lot of it might be unsolicited advice from friends and family, but if you're someone that uses social media, and you find that a lot of it is full of nutrition misinformation and unachievable body types. And I recommend cleaning this up, unfollowing those that shame you or make you feel guilty about your food choices, and try your best to find these evidence based pages. I do have tons of examples of evidence based nutrition and Facebook pages. But a lot of these pages aren't familiar with you and your life, and everyone's nutrition is unique to them. And so if you're experiencing a chronic illness and likely doing other things like running a household, chasing children, um, working, then you certainly don't have time or the mental energy to give away any to anyone, including influencers. So anyway, I do have a list of some evidence-based nutrition social media pages if anyone's interested. Um, yeah. Next, this is just our flyer for our cancer nutrition class. I and another dietitian, Edie Leonard, teach this twice a month. And if you're able to get your phone out, you can scan that quick QR code, and that will take you to a link to a survey, and then you can fill it out and sign up for the class that way. Or you can do it later. It's totally fine. You will have access to the slide after. And there's also a link down below, the www.providence.org/OR Cancer Nutrition, which you can also sign up for the class there. I guess what I say too is this cancer nutrition class is specifically for those who are about to start treatment or who are undergoing treatment, as we talk about many of the side effects associated with their treatment and how to navigate those side effects. Okay, thank you guys. And I believe maybe someone will take over and we'll start a Q&A session.
Yes, thank you so much, Christina. The presentation was wonderful. I will go ahead and stop the recording right now so that we can get to the questions.